Graveside Paranormal Tours, GravesideParanormal.com, Graveside Paranormal on YouTube. How's everybody liking the tour tonight? Adam, are you here? Talk to us. Well, hello everyone. This is Neil with Graveside Paranormal, and I welcome you now to Spirits by the Graveside. Once again, this is Spirits by the Graveside, and then what that means is grab your favorite spirit. This is mine. It does not have to be an alcoholic drink, but something that you like to sit back and you like to enjoy while listening to the fine stories that we're going to talk to you about tonight. So go ahead, grab that glass, give it a little twist, pour it in. All right, let's start it off. Tonight we are going to be first talking about the news. I have to say thank you to everybody first off for sending me nice little messages while I've been sick. I did have the COVID-19. I just want to say thank you to the people that sent me messages. It is very greatly appreciated. I do feel a lot better today. I went outside and I actually tried to mow the lawn. I did a pretty good job. I don't know if my wife liked it, but I did it. So, all right, let's start off with the news then tonight. We're going to be talking about May 3rd. May 3rd is going to be Paranormal Day. A day of celebrating ghosts, UFOs, anything paranormal. That day is going to be on Sunday. So I thought the best show for tonight would be the story about Resurrection Mary. I think that would be the best show for tonight to talk about. So I welcome you two on May 3rd. Welcome. Happy Paranormal Day. On to the next thing in news from Planet Weird. Hot off the press, Phenomicon. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Phenomicon before. What they're going to be doing is they're going to be doing a first online paranormal conference where I guess you can meet your favorite paranormal stars off of the paranormal online event that they're going to talk about, Phenomicon. Another thing in the news, coming from Coast to Coast AM that I was looking at today, in England, there is a guy who is walking around dressed as a plague doctor back from the 17th century. He's dressing around in this black outfit with this long beak, and people have been very scared, so they called the police, but they're saying he hasn't done anything wrong. He's just dressing like, a very odd character from the plague back in the day. Odd that he's dressing in the time that we are during COVID-19. That's one of the things that's going on. He did not commit any crimes or anything like that, but I guess there's a lot of people who are very, very upset with what's been going on with him. Walking around and nobody says that he's been caught yet. It is what it is. So let's move on. What I'd like to do right now is I'd like to welcome in our first guest, well, our only guest actually, is Mr. Robert Trzeciak, the King of Paranormal Radio. Welcome, Bob. How are you today, buddy?
I'm fine, Neil. Thank you very much, sir. The music was a little different. It's more like a heavy metal thing.
Yeah, I'm a little bit different. I appreciate the oldies. But I do like a little bit of something a little rough, a little hard, for music sometimes. And I think it's a good attention grabber. I think it's a very good attention grabber. What I'd like to talk about is with Bob tonight, like I said, we are going to talk about Resurrection Mary. What I'd like to do tonight is I'd like to take an in-depth look at each and every girl, at least 3 of these ladies, young ladies, who are probably Resurrection Mary. Let's start off with the story real quick about Resurrection Mary. Well, it starts anywhere between the late 1920s, early 1930s. And what happened was there was a young lady and a young man who were at the O. Henry Ballroom. And like most couples, they get into arguments. He probably said some things that definitely she probably didn't like. She decided to leave the O. Henry Ballroom, and it was a winter's night, a very cold night. This is how the story is. That she goes out into the night, very distraught, of course upset, very highly emotional, goes out into Archer Avenue, and people who are familiar with Archer Avenue know that it's a long, winding road, and it winds a lot, and there's a lot of cars going back and forth, and sometimes you don't see them, and they don't really have a lot of light, and I'm back in those days, they didn't have any street lights, period. So she goes out to this road, distraught, crying, not knowing what's going on with the one I love, and then out of nowhere comes a vehicle and hits this young lady. This young lady, supposedly named Mary, she dies right there. The cops come. The parents are called. They identify the body of this young lady. She supposedly is buried in her favorite white dress in Resurrection Cemetery. Now, here's where the problem is. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a folklore story. And let me explain. And if Bob's going to be chiming in a minute about his opinions about this. Is that there is no identification to this young lady. There's no identification to her. There is no identification to a hit-and-run driver. There is no identification to the mother or the father that this happened. There is no identification to a boyfriend who may have lived on and said, hey, this was my girl. This is her name. This is her full name. This is where she's buried. This is where she lived. This is where she went to school. None of that. My opinion on this story is that no matter what, it's a folklore story. But what's odd about this story is it's a story that took on a life of itself. It developed its own life after a story was told. I believe that this story was actually a story that was meant for young ladies, that was put together for young ladies so that they would not go out long into the night, smoking, drinking, dancing late into the night, or these are the ramifications that possibly could happen to you. Now, this is just my opinion of what I believe this story derived from. And I'm sure Bob's going to give his own. So I welcome you, Bob Trzeciak, to please give your opinion.
Well, okay, Neil. Yeah, that was, what you're telling is one rendition of the story. And it depends all on who you talk to and who, eyewitnesses that actually claim to have seen the entity of Resurrection Mary, and then the actual historic facts. All these things, all these stories, every ghost story starts somewhere. There's some historical basis to it. It all starts somewhere with the death of somebody, something causing that haunt. And when you research the Resurrection Mary story a little further and try to start putting some of the facts, I have to say, me growing up in Summit, that was one of the first stories I heard as a kid growing up was Resurrection Mary. Sure. And I lived not too far from the Resurrection Cemetery, and eventually I myself am going to be interred in that cemetery myself too, because a lot of my family are in there and everything, and eventually I'll be there myself. And that's one of the stories that I grew up with, was the story of Resurrection Mary. And you do hear different versions of it and different renditions of it. And I think what happens is some of the facts kind of get crossed, and the stories kind of get melded, and they get melded into one, sometimes into two. I've narrowed Resurrection Mary down to actually two. I don't think there's one. I believe there are actually two Resurrection Marys. Two I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to leave the third one to you. You can talk about that one. And what I'm basing it on are basically eyewitness accounts. Over the years, I've collected about 33 different stories from people who in some one way or another claim to have had some sort of an encounter with Resurrection Mary, or what they believe to have been Resurrection Mary. Now, to give you a little bit of the history on who I believe are the Resurrection Marys, the two that I think. One is a young girl, a 13-year-old, and that would be Anna Norkus. Now,
let me stop you for 1 second, Bob.
Okay.
I don't mean to interrupt you. But let's...
Oh, sure you do.
Yeah, sure I do. Let's take one at a time, and I agree with you starting off with Anna Maria Norkus. So let's start off with Anna Maria Norkus, and then we're going to lead into two others. So go ahead with Anna Maria Norkus, Bob. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Anna Norkus, a young girl, Lithuanian girl, 13 years old, lived in the Garfield Ridge area, the clearing district over there, not too far actually from where I lived in Summit, right off of 63rd and Harlan. Matter of fact, that's where she died. And her story is... she wanted to go to the O. Henry Ballroom, which you had mentioned earlier, the Willowbrook Ballroom, but she wasn't going with a boyfriend. She was only a 13-year-old girl. See, this is where stories kind of get crossed and things get mixed. She actually went with her father and with another couple. There were 4 of them, I believe, in the car. And she wanted her father to take her there for her birthday. That was her birthday present that she wanted, to go there to listen to the music, to listen to the bands. And this would have been in July of 1927. So they did that. The father agreed to it, took her there. And en route coming home down Old Archer Road up onto Harlem, they made their way to go home, right off of 63rd and Highland, right to the corner where I lived there. I lived right on 63rd and Highland for 58 years. They lived there. Their car fell into a trench, a 25-foot drop-off that was left there by the railroad. Anna was thrown from the car and killed instantly, but the others all lived. And this is one thing about the story is the 2 resurrection rays that I'm going to talk about, she gets killed, but the other people in the car live. So Anna, now, they go and have Anna's funeral, a 13-year-old girl, who's expecting a 13-year-old girl to die before her parents do. So they went to Sylvia's funeral home, which was in Summit, and they talked to George Sylvius, the funeral director, and said, he said, where would you like her interred? And all that. And they said, well, we'd like St. Casimir's, but we don't have any lots bought yet or anything. Well, like I say, who's expecting a young girl to die, before the parents? So he said, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. He says, just temporarily have Anna buried in Resurrection Cemetery, because there is going to be a gravedigger strike within a short time. And what's going to happen is if you don't have her buried, she may not get buried. So just have her temporarily buried in Resurrection Cemetery. When you get the lots bought and things squared away at St. Casimir's Cemetery, then you can have her reinterred and buried over there. So supposedly that's what happened. That's what happened with Anna Norquist. Now, some of the, maybe the unrest, there may have been a mix-up where she actually is not. Now, in Resurrection Cemetery, there is no gravestone to Anna Norquist. There is no gravestone there.
Right.
There is one, however, in St. Casimir Cemetery.
Yes.
Over in Section 10, way in the back of the cemetery there, right off of 111th and Pulaski. Actually, not too far from where I live. I live on 119th and Pulaski.
Right.
In fact, I walked over there the other day. I didn't walk to her grave, but I walked up to the cemetery, which is a little bit of a walk for me, but I did it. And anywho, that's where she's buried back there, supposedly. Now, some of the feeling of the unrest of her may be because maybe she wasn't reinterred. Maybe there was some sort of a mix-up and she never really did get buried in St. Casimir, so that's why her restless spirit would be seen walking along Resurrection Cemetery, along Resurrection in that area there. So that's one thing about the spirit of Anna Norquist. Now, she would be a 13-year-old, and her description matches what a lot of eyewitnesses claim to have seen. Young, blonde-haired girl, very pretty, wearing a white dress. And we know for a fact that she was buried in a white dress. She was buried in the dress she made her communion, her first communion, in the year before. The year before, she had just made her first Holy Communion at St. Joseph's Church in Summit, and we know she was buried in that dress. So that's one story of one. Now, another one, well, the story with that one gets a little more different, too, with that.
You know what? The thing with Anna Maria, the thing with Anna Maria Norquist is that she was only 6 weeks out of her 13th birthday when she passed.
Yeah, as I say, she was a 13-year-old girl, so she's a young girl. So a lot of people claim, very pretty. We're thinking, I think many people are thinking, she was like a young, hot flapper from the 1920s. No, not the case with Anna Norquist. She's a young girl. Not the case with her. But nonetheless, very pretty. If you do see her photos, the oval photo actually was on the headstone at one time, and then it either was taken off or it fell off or whatever, was removed for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't want anyone going to the grave site. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, that photo is around all over, so you will see that photo. And she actually has the white dress on with the veil from her communion.
And nobody knows where that photo is.
And short bobbed hair, like short blonde bobbed hair, typical like 1920s kind, almost like a Buster Brown kind of look hairstyle that she wears. So that would be Anna Norquist. Now, her father, August, did come under a lot of scrutiny for this and a lot of criticism. And many people blamed him for her death. He said, what did you take a young girl to a roadhouse like that for? You should have never done that. Now look what happened. Your daughter died as a result of this and all and everything. And her father is actually interred in St. Casimir Cemetery. And there is a strange, grimaced-faced ghost that sometimes is seen. It may be dormant now because it hasn't been seen for some time. That's seen over there on 111th there in Pulaski. And many people attribute that ghostly apparition to the unrest of August Norquist, because he came under a lot of scrutiny from that, and it may be a guilt that he lived with. They did hold, after her, she died in July of 1927, and they did hold an inquest, which took about a month long, at the Sylvia's funeral home in Summit, to determine who actually was at fault for her death, and they determined that it was the railroad itself, because they left that drop-off, 25-foot drop-off, unmarked, not marked or anything, and it should not have happened. If it was marked, you might have seen it, and that might not have happened. Actually, in actuality, a lot of people know it, but the very next day after she died, another man died with the same thing. His car fell into that embankment. He died
Yeah,
from that
that's
too.
right. That's
so,
right.
So I'm
Now,
sure. I'm sure after that they must have put something up about that.
I know that they have a nice little story. A certain writer came up with a certain story that they believe that Anna Maria Norquist is the one that's seen over at Resurrection, walking the gates, walking the fence line over there, and like you were saying, Augustus is probably walking the fence line. That they say that there's this creeper that is along the fence line of St. Casimir Cemetery. It's a nice story. It's a very well told story.
Just like the one you told earlier, about the hitchhiking ghost and all that and everything like that. These are stories. This is where legends start. See, all these stories. That's one thing I love about the paranormal. Is all these stories start somewhere. And then through the years, the story gets added to, and things get taken away, and facts get jumbled. And that's where you, as a researcher, not so much even as a paranormal investigator, but more as a researcher, to try to get the facts on this. Was there such a thing as this? Is there such a thing as a Resurrection Mary? Who may she have been? This is where things come in for a person that does research on that.
Right. And like August, like you said, he was blamed. He was originally blamed for it, but that goes back to what I was saying originally. Is
like
that
a morality.
they're saying that you shouldn't have had your daughter out at up to 1:30 in the morning, dancing at the age of 12 years of age, and that goes back to what I was saying about the morality story that was originally presented to people. So it kind of goes in line with what I'm talking about of what happened to Augustus, that he was never able to be, justified. He was always blamed and shunned in his community because he blamed him for his death. And it's a very sad story, actually. Me and Steve, just so you know, we recently went...
Oh, say hi to Steve. I keep forgetting to tell you. How's Steve doing?
He's doing really good.
Good.
We just recently went out to St. Casimir Cemetery because we were just going around just because, what's going on.
Sure, and you don't come by me. And I'm 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 5 blocks down there. You don't come by my house.
Right, I'll try not to, believe me. And so we go there, and Steve's going to add a video on to what we're doing on our YouTube one, on this broadcast that we're doing tonight, is that we asked the question with the Anahata box, how old were you before you died? Now, we all know that she was 6 weeks before her 13th birthday, and we actually got an answer saying 12. How old was she when she died? When Anna Maria Norquist died, how old was she? Just so you know. You want to know what? That sounded like 12, didn't it?
Okay.
Once again, an intelligent answer to an intelligent question that we had there. So, moving on to the next young lady that I don't know, you probably are going to discredit, and I would understand. Everybody to each their own, what they want to do.
No, I don't discredit anybody.
Right.
I don't.
Let's say Mary Miskowski. This young lady died on October 30. Well, no, she got hit on October 31st, 1930, leaving from a Halloween party or going to a Halloween party. She wore her mother's supposedly wedding dress. And she died during being hit and run. And she died, they believe, either November 3rd or November 5th. But here's the odd thing.
Yeah, she actually died November 5th.
November 5th. But here's
happens to be my birthday.
Oh, is that your birthday? Well,
yeah.
We'll wait till then. And so what happened was...
That's why I remembered that one.
So what happened is that there was a census that was done in 1930 showing that there was a girl by the name of Mary Miskowski that lived in a home with parents named Helen and John. Now, there's eyewitness accounts from cousins and other people in the community saying that this young lady was hit. But the weird thing is, there was never anything put in the news. This is a very strange story. There was nothing ever put inside of a newspaper about this. There is no death certificate of it. What happened is there was a lady who did die on November 5th, but her name was Mary Muchowski. She was an older lady. She was 67 years of age when she died.
The Resurrection Mary description.
Right. And she is not the one. Now, the Mary Miskowski that they say.
Stories get muddled and facts get twisted and people mix things up.
That's why we try to find all the facts here at Spirits by the Graveside. So Mary Miskowski from the census, she was 19 years old during that census. She actually died in 1956, and she was married to a man by the name of John Sutko. And she died at the age of about 45 years of age. So the original Mary Miskowski, who supposedly got hit on Halloween, there is no death certificate for her. Supposedly the girl who is on the census...
Well, there is somewhere. You just have to know where to find it.
That's the thing, is it isn't found. But there is a death certificate for the census for the Mary Miskowski from the house of John and Helen of 1930. So maybe this is not... somewhere down the line on this story here, there's a major confusion.
Well, what it is she's a possible candidate for Resurrection Mary.
Well, a girl is a possible candidate. Supposedly also on that date, there was a boy who lived on Damon Avenue as well, who was hit on that day in a car accident, I found out. That's another odd thing. Now,
it's funny when you start researching this, you find out how many people,
right,
died in or around the same time.
Now, this girl here, Mary Miskowski, supposedly ran out and got hit by a vehicle. I want everybody to keep that in mind because I'm going to get back to that in a little bit. But once again, through the research, there is no Mary Miskowski in any kind of records that died that day, no newspaper clippings, but she died from the census. This is the girl from the census. Now understand, I went off a guy by the name of Troy Taylor, his research, very good research. I sometimes just look at some of the stuff and read it. It's very good. Also, Mr. Johnson, Ray Johnson, he also did it. So I'm not going to take credit for any of this. I just, read things and I look at things and I research, and they found out some.
Ray Johnson did a lot of research on the Resurrection Mary story.
Right.
A lot of research, and Ray had a very, very wonderful stroke of good fortune. He actually was working. I don't know what he was doing, something, census or something with an election judge or something like that, and he came in contact with a Thomas McMahon. And somehow or another, between the two of them, they started talking about Resurrection Mary.
Right.
And he says, my father, or not McMahon, yeah. Mm-hmm. Turns out, this is the grandson of George Sobiesk, the man that did the funeral for Anna Norcus.
Okay.
And he has all the original records and everything, the death certificate and burial site and grave lots and everything and all this and the other and all that and everything like the other. And then, actually through Ray, about 2 years ago, he contacted the mother, Hetty McMahon, and she contacted me via Facebook and said, did you go to grade school or did you go to St. Place School when you lived in Summit? And I said, yes, I did. And she said, I was your first grade. So in actuality, the daughter of the man that always claimed he buried Resurrection Mary was my first grammar school teacher, Miss Sobiesk. She was indeed Miss Sobiesk at that time.
That just goes to show you.
She was my grammar school teacher. So Ray had a streak of good luck meeting up with this gentleman and gave him a lot of records and stuff on the Anna Norcus files.
Right. Now, once again, small world. You meet these people and they're all in the same world as you. So let's move on from Mary Miskowski, or if you want to say anything else about Mary, please. You want to move on?
No, Mary, she's one of the candidates, and
it's a mystery
something
story.
With that, because like I said, I have 33 different stories about Resurrection Mary, people that have... I myself, as many times as I've been up and down Archer Road, along Resurrection Cemetery, in the dark, in the daylight, at all different hours and everything, not necessarily looking for Resurrection Mary, but just because different business would have taken me that way. Either going someplace or dropping someone off or taking someone off, whatever the reason, I'm up and down that way. But I've never seen anything even remotely close to anything what Resurrection Mary is supposed to look like. Maybe I'm just the wrong person, maybe I'm not hitting at the right time, whatever the reason. But I've never, in many, many years, I've never seen anything even close to what Resurrection Mary is supposed to look like. But like I say, I do have 33 different stories from people that claim to have some encounter with her. And one happens to be fairly recent, from 1999, that I got from a police officer. And he claimed, when you mentioned the wedding dress, that's what sparked me to think of the story. He claimed that on the opposite side of the cemetery, there was a girl there that was crying, and she was in a wedding dress. And he thought it was unusual that at an early hour in the morning, this girl would be there, dressed in a wedding dress and crying on the side of the road there. So he went to see if he could assist. And he says, as he rolled down his window to speak with her and see if he could assist her, figuring maybe she got jilted by her groom or whatever, who knows what, why she would be out there in a wedding gown at that hour. He said a call came in, and he had to bend over to hit the thing on the radio to get the call or whatever, and then when he glanced back, she was gone. So that's one rendition of Resurrection Mary. So they're not all, picked up in a car.
Sure.
And
Yeah, there's so many different,
all that.
Right, there's so many different stories.
So that could be the Mary Muskowski. That could be her. Another one that I would like to go on, and this one here, there again, I'm basing this strictly on eyewitness testimonies and credible witnesses, people that have given me their stories and their versions of it. This one is Mary Bergovi, a girl named Mary Bergovi.
All right, let's lead into Mary Bergovi right now. Let me just let the listeners in. I agree with you to start that one. Mary Bergovi, once again, here's something odd, Bob. Mary Muskowski and Mary Bergovi both lived on Damon Avenue.
Yes, they did.
And you want to know what else is
odd?
A
Polish neighborhood.
Yeah, you want to know what else is odd about that? Is also the Grimes sisters lived on Damon Avenue. Not to go off subject for a minute, but I just find it very odd of all these stories that three of these young ladies, or actually four, I'm sorry, are off of all Damon Avenue, only blocks apart. Now, let me move off the Grimes sisters and get to Mary Bergovi. Now, she was originally born on April 7, 1912. She was only a month out of her, I believe, 22nd, her birthday. She died in 1934, around, May 10th, 1934. So let me go ahead.
Now you're talking about Mary Muskowski or Mary Bergovi?
Mary Bergovi now. We're going to talk about
Mary Bergovi's 1934, right.
One of the things is that I want everybody
to
keep in mind.
Did anyone ever give you a description of what they believe was Mary Muskowski outside of the one
She was
that
blonde.
I got?
She was a blonde girl. I did research. She was a blonde-haired girl. Now here's the thing about Mary Bergovi. She is a brunette. And she was buried in.
I want to come up with that. Some descriptions I've been given are totally different. Very, very different. Some are very pretty blonde-haired, white-dressed, and that could be either Mary Muskowski with her wedding gown or young Anna Norkus in her communion dress and communion veil. But Mary Bergovi, a very different description. Mary Bergovi, an orchid-colored dress, that we know for a fact. Now, you said there are no newspaper articles or death certificates for Muskowski, but for Mary Bergovi, yes, we have all that.
Right. Yes, we
Mary Bergovi was indeed buried in a very favorite orchid-colored dress that she liked very much. We know that she was buried in that. Now, one of the descriptions I got from a gentleman, a very vivid description of Mary Bergovi, to the T, he almost described her. He says they were, driving along Archer Road at an odd hour, coming home from Berwyn, heading out to Orland Park, coming home from some sort of a gathering or party at one of the lodges, the Moose Lodge or Elks or one of those type of things. And he says, right by the gates by the cemetery, he says, but not at the gates, closer to Archer Road. He says, there I see this girl, and he gave a real good description, so he must have gotten a very good look at her. She's an orchid-colored dress, or corsage pinned to the dress, high-heeled shoes, silk stockings, old-fashioned wavy hairstyle done with little pin curls, all. And he says, geez, what the heck, somebody looking like this out at this hour of the night standing by the road like this? So he nudges his wife, who kind of dozed off on the passenger side in the front seat with him, and he says they both turned to get a glimpse, but now she's no longer by the road. She is inside the gates of the cemetery, and they both watched in awe as she just misted away and just dematerialized in front of them. And he gave a very good description of what Mary Bergovi was supposed to look like. Now, Mary Bergovi, again, like I mentioned, Anna Norkus was killed in the car, and the other people in the car with her lived. Same thing happened with Mary Bergovi. She and her boyfriend and another couple were in the car. Mary Bergovi was thrown through the windshield and mangled pretty badly because the funeral director that did, I don't know who the funeral director that did her funeral, said he actually had to put stitches and things in her face to make her presentable for her wake, for her viewing. And Mary Bergovi supposedly was very, very pretty, too, very pretty. And a little bit older now, too, a little older girl.
Yeah, she basically, what happened was, for our viewers, is that her and her friend named Vern, another young lady, earlier in the day, they met a couple young men, and Vern didn't like these two young boys, and she called them wild. That's exactly what she said. She looked upon it, and that's the description that she said. They were very wild kind of kids. They were both invited out to go out for the night. Vern said no. Mary Bergovi said, yeah, I'm going to go out with these guys. And she warned her against her not to. Her dad actually told her not to go out that night. she did go out that night, and they partied like most 21-year-olds are going to party. They go out there and they have a good time. And they went to the Old Henry Ballroom, and it was late night now. The Old Henry was closing down, so they decided to go down Archer Avenue, go into the Loop, and they hit an L train pole later on in the evening, and she died just like you said. She hit it. She was badly injured. She died that night. It's a horrible story of another young girl that dies down there. What's very odd about also this story is, Bob, and I know you're better at telling this part here, is the caretaker that is at Resurrection Cemetery says that he saw her, was it the day after or a couple of days after, actually walking around the cemetery, Bob?
Yes, not too long after her death, people did say by her gravesite, over by the gravesite where she's buried, they did see a girl matching that description, actually walking around barefoot out there, and they thought, gee, that's kind of odd. And that's been noted by a few different people through the years. But it seemed very early on, people seeing her barefoot walking around by the grave. That seemed to have been an early story that was told about her, like in the 30s, maybe up to the 40s, maybe, and that would be about it. After that story kind of disappears, and then all of them are the Archer Road story, that type of thing. Now, part of the reason you say, well, why the unrest? Now, Mary Bergovi, I'm not even sure if she was at the O. Henry Ballroom. She may have actually been at a different spot altogether. She may have been at a place called Liberty Grove, which was over on Mozart, and that's no longer there.
Okay.
She may have been at that one, dancing there and having a good time there, partying there, and then hit the divider on the L tracks and got killed that way. And there again, the story may be a little mixed on that. But any to hoot, part of the unrest for Mary Bergovi, you say, well, okay, fine, a young girl dies in a car crash. Every young girl that dies in a car crash isn't a ghost, isn't a spirit, isn't a resurrection Mary. Why her? Part of it may be the unrest of her. Now, she died in 1934, and in 1934, the Depression in this country was at its height, sort of like what we're kind of going into now, unfortunately, I hate to say.
Yeah.
I think we're headed for a big economic depression. Anywho, I don't want to get into current events, but anywho, in the 1930s, 1934, the Depression was probably like at its worst, and very, very few people had money. When a family member would die, it was a tough burden to come up with money to buy a funeral lot and pay for a funeral. So the Catholic cemeteries had a thing they called term burials.
Right.
And what that was, you left a very small deposit on a burial plot, sometimes a $5 deposit, sometimes only $3. Your loved one could be buried in the lot, and then at the end of the term, which was a very long term, 25 years, sometimes 30 years. Now, they understand they're making this very easy for payments because they knew people didn't have money in those days. You paid the lot off. If you did not pay the lot off at the end of that term, your loved one could then be removed from that lot, taken and buried over into a potter's field, and then that lot could be resold. And they believe this is what happened with Mary Bergovi.
Now I'm sorry to interrupt. Is that there's people who believe that certain tombstones that say Mary Bergovi on it, that is not her. That she's actually in a marker. Am I correct on that?
No, her grave's not marked.
No, that's what I'm saying.
No
it's not marked. It's just a marker.
No, there's no headstone. There's nothing marking her grave.
Nothing.
Yeah. Nothing for Mary Bergovi. No.
Right.
There is a Joanna Bergovi over there. There is a Mary Bergovi. Some people believe that may have been her mother. No, not so. I don't think that's even a relation. It may be related. I don't know who those are. That one I didn't research. But Mary Bergovi, the Mary Bergovi we're speaking of now, her grave has no headstone on it.
Right.
So there again, now part of the reason for her unrest may be not because of the death, but because of where she's buried. What may have happened with her is maybe possibly, this is a theory that we have floating around for some years, the mother did not pay the term lot off, and then her daughter was moved and taken to a different lot, and then someone else buried there. So that way, the unrest for her, she's going back to her original gravesite. That's why her spirit would have been seen walking around there. Maybe that's the unrest for her. We don't know.
Right. You know what? Maybe it's an unrest because she never fulfilled through her life. And she was the kind of girl who liked to go out and have a lot of fun. And there's some eyewitness accounts about a young girl. They even said that her friends used to see her on Archer Avenue. There's actually, they said that we saw her and she would try to jump into a car and they recognized her as being her. I don't know the end result of that, of course, but there is eyewitness accounts. I think maybe this is a girl
now, resurrection stories vary, and many, like I say, over the years, they vary quite differently. What actually happened on a few people actually claimed to have hit her with a car. They claimed to say, yes, she was crossing Archer Road. We hit someone with the car. They get spooked, no pun intended with this, but they get scared, believing they hit somebody with a car,
Right, yeah.
and they head right down
Yeah.
up Archer Road to the Justice Police Station and tell the police, we hit somebody with our car. You have to investigate this. The person just started out in front of our car, and we hit them. We don't know, that was it. So then police, of course, go. They do have to make a report on this.
Right.
They do have to make a report. They do have to file this. And then, of course, they don't find the body. They don't find anything there. And they put on their little file on the case report, possible resurrectionary sighting. There's actually a police officer that lost his job over this because he mentioned something about this, which they're supposed to keep quiet. They're not supposed to say anything about that. But so that does lend a little credibility to the story of something being there of Resurrection Mary. So those are two that I believe. And there again, partly from descriptions people give. Now also to the location of her. Now, of course, we mentioned the one. We said very early on she's seen by the gravesite. Some people claim to see her dancing barefoot by the gravesite. Now, some people claim to see Resurrection Mary on the Archer Road side of the cemetery. Some people claim to see the spirit on the Roberts Road side, on the other side of the cemetery. So she's kind of seen in two spots, well, leading you to believe that there may be two of them,
Well, maybe. Now, let's fast forward a little bit to 1939. Mr. Jerry Palis. Very interesting story. Let me put it up. Jerry Palis' story starts off as basically, he goes out one night to Liberty Grove. Now, you were talking about Liberty Grove, that may have been the place that she left from to really go down to the downtown
Yeah,
area.
I'm glad you brought this up.
You know,
I'll tell you a little something about the story. There's a little bit of controversy about that. Go ahead, tell your story.
So you have Jerry Palis, who goes to a place called Liberty Grove to go out dancing. He believed that he was a woman's man, and he's out there and he looks across the dance floor and he sees this girl about 5'7", blonde. Now let me stop for a second. He gives testimony to Richard Crowe in 1986. It's on videotape, saying that this girl was blonde. He's saying that this girl was blonde. He went and asked her to dance. She danced with him. He said that she was cold to the touch, and they danced the night away. He asked, "Can I take you home?" And she told him yes. Supposedly, she gave him the address of where she lived. Now, the address was 4611 Damon Avenue. Now, that's where Mary Bergovie lived. Now, let me just continue. What happened was they get into the vehicle and they start driving home. She asked them, not Mary Bergovie, well, I'm going to say Mary Bergovie, but Resurrection Mary says, "Drive me down Archer Avenue." He's like, "Drive me down Archer Avenue? Why would I do that?" She said, "Just do it." Now, he just met this girl, so he's going to listen to her because he wants to just be the best for her that night. So they start driving down, and all of a sudden she says, "Stop." Where does she stop? Right in front of Resurrection Cemetery gates. She gets out, and she walks out, and she disappears into the gate line. Now, the next day, if I was that guy, I'd look at that and be like, holy shit, what was that? What does this man do, Mr. Jerry Palis? He goes to the address the next following day. He goes to this address, knocks on the door. The mother answers the door, and he says, "Hey, can I speak with Mary?" Now, Mary died in 1934. She says to him, "Mary's been dead for 5 years. There's no way that you met her." He told her, "I met her last night. I danced with her. Can I speak with her?" Now, being a mom whose daughter died, you're probably very getting upset listening to this guy thinking that he's a damn fool. So over her shoulder, he points over, and she sees a picture of Mary Bergovie, but that's a brunette. But he swears that's the girl I was dancing with last night. Now, I don't know if in an ethereal thing, when you die, all of a sudden you become blonde-haired. I don't know about stuff like that. That's something if, like, I die, I got to figure it out, and I'll come back and tell you kind of thing. But it's a very interesting story. He went to his grave swearing to it. He gave testimony to Mr. Richard Crowe, God bless his soul, that she was 5'7", about blonde-haired. All right, Bob, I'll let you go ahead now. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. There's a little bit of controversy about that story. Number one, the address he gives would be the Bergovi address. And we know for a fact that Mary Bergovi was indeed brunette. She was not blonde.
Correct.
So either Jerry Palis' memory faded over the years, or maybe he was just picking up on something else and maybe cashing in on the Resurrection Mary story. Now, to the best of my knowledge, Mr. Palis, God rest his soul, he's been dead for many years now too, never made any money unless Richard Crowe paid him for his interview. I don't know. I don't know if Mr. Palis ever made or got any money for telling his story. But he always told this story. He always told the same story. So he may, yes, have indeed experienced something. Just what and who with, I don't know. But there are a couple of things about the story that just don't click. Number one, if you were at Liberty Grove Ballroom and you're asking someone to take you to Resurrection Cemetery, that's a considerable distance to go. That's a considerable distance.
Okay.
Now, if they were indeed dancing at the Willowbrook Ballroom, that's not too far from Resurrection Cemetery. That would be fine. But then she lived way up on Mozart, or up on Damon Avenue, so that's a long drive to that. And then the other thing is, how did he get the address? Did the spirit of Resurrection Mary give her the address? How did he know where to go to?
Well,
now, if he danced with the blonde-haired one, as he said he did, that would have been young Anna Norcus. I don't think he danced at Willowbrook with a 13-year-old girl in a communion dress. I don't know about
the one thing I would say is, how would he randomly know that address? He's saying that...
Yeah, I don't know. See, that's what I'm saying. There's a little bit of controversy about that story. He stuck to that story. He indeed is buried in Resurrection Cemetery himself, too. But he stuck with that story all his life. He never fainted from it. Many people over the years kind of laughed at him and scoffed at him and everything like that. But I take every story seriously. I believe people experience... Like I said, I've collected 33 of them. Some of them are a little far-fetched. Some people have told me a story. I believe they may have experienced something. It may not have been Resurrection Mary, but they may have experienced something. I'll tell you about one of the more unusual stories that I've heard. But anyway, we'll stick with this first before I tell you that. But yeah, there's a little bit of controversy about that. So I don't know, or maybe like I said, just over the years, you're talking 1939, you're talking 1986 when he relates the story to Richard Crowe.
Right.
For the taped interview, anyway, he did write about it in his book also too. And in the book, he does mention a blonde-haired girl too.
Yeah, that's the thing that gets me is I'm trying to understand, how does a brunette go to a blonde? it's very interesting. Yeah. I'm not disputing his story, because what we do...
No, like I say, he may have experienced something, but just what it was, I don't know. And then maybe your memory just fades you over the years, and you're thinking this or thinking that, or because you've heard so much about a blonde-haired, that's why you're saying it was blonde. I don't know. I just don't know.
Maybe it's a let-in story. It's a let-in story, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
He leads into it because he keeps
a couple things about it, like I say. Number one, the description of the spirit itself is kind of controversial. And then also, too, the idea of them being at Liberty Grove and then saying, take me to Resurrection Cemetery. That's a considerable distance to drive, especially in 1939. I can remember when I was a kid, Archer Road wasn't too well lit along that cemetery. It wasn't too well lit because there were no subdivisions on the opposite side and all that. None of that was there. You just had a couple of the monument companies and a couple of streetlights, and that was about it. Yeah, I don't know. Mr. Palis may have indeed experienced something, but just exactly what that was, I don't know. Or if he was just a great storyteller and liked to tell the story. But as far as I know, I don't think he ever made any money off the story. I don't think he ever did. He may have just did it for a little, 15 minutes of fame type thing. I don't know. I really just don't know. I don't like to speak ill, not kindly of the dead. Whatever he may have experienced, he did. But just like I say, there's a couple of little things about his story that just don't click right. When I read it, and then read it again, and then when I listened to it, when I listened to the interview, it just didn't click. Sometimes, too, in interviews, too, he would speak about touching her, and she very cold to the touch.
Cold to the touch, yes.
And sometimes he would say she was not very talkative. She didn't say much. But then other times she did talk. Because she told him somehow he got the address, and then somehow she told him, take me to the cemetery, so they did speak, so...
Well, that's the reason why I think that brings the validity to the story. I mean, this man had to research a girl's death, and would have to be very morbid to research someone's death, knock on the parent's door, and say, hey, I was dancing with your daughter who died 5 years ago. That's very morbid and evil. I mean, why would you do something like that?
I don't think he presented it that way. See, my impression of the story about that, now this part of the story about him coming to the door, I believe he was going to the address figuring he was going to see her.
Yeah,
Not telling the mother, I
that's
can't
my
fix your
that's.
daughter who's been dead 5 years ago. I believe he wanted to just reconnect with Mary.
Oh, I'm
and then
sure.
the mother said, no, no, no. And at first she was very reluctant, saying things. She's not home, she's not here, this and that and the other. And then he was very insistent about it. She finally said, well, no, you did not dance with my daughter. My daughter's been dead for X amount of years. Whereupon, supposedly, the door opened up, and sitting on the piano in the front parlor, he says, well, that's her picture right there. He gets a close-up, and he says, that's her. And she says, no, you did not dance with my daughter. My daughter's been dead for X amount of years.
That's what I'm saying is someone would have to.
Of it, you know.
Yeah, what I'm saying is someone would have to put in a lot of hard work if they're faking this.
Oh yeah,
that's
and
what I'm saying. I mean, only
and some people do.
You know, and to find this girl's address and this and that, I believe there's validity to the story.
Oh sure.
Now, you're saying that you believe that the two Resurrection Marys then are Anna Maria Norquist and Mary Berkovi. Would you say that's a finalized?
And I believe those are the two. Now, I'm basing that, like I said, not having seen it or witnessed it myself personally, but just on eyewitness testimony, things through the years and stories that people have related to me. Now, I'm going to tell you about one of the more unusual stories. Like I said, I have some odd ones, too. One story, a gentleman never even saw her at all, but believes he had a Resurrection Mary encounter. Going down Archer Road, at an odd hour of the night, and he said the car seemed to act up, where he couldn't control the car, like something was wrong with the steering. And he was heading down Archer going to Orland Park, too, incidentally.
Right.
And so he said he pulled over to the side, like by one of the monument companies there, just to stop and check the car and see what was causing it, if there was something wrong with a tire or something like that. So he says when he got out of the car and the courtesy light on the car went on inside, he looked at the passenger side of the seat, and he says there was a wet mark on the seat and on the back, as if somebody in wet clothing sat there.
Okay.
And made an impression with, like, on the seat and on the back, sat there wet. And he said it was sort of a rainy, misty type day. So he said his first impression was to look and see, well, was a window open or was something leaking in the car? And he couldn't find anything that would cause this spot to be there. And then he said he didn't think too much of it then, right at that moment, got back in his car and drove on. But he says he firmly believes that it was Resurrection Mary that sat in the car with him, and then she somehow sat there, he didn't notice her, and then she vanished before he could get a glimpse of her. But he says he had no other explanation for it. So, I don't know.
Right.
Another one are screams. Screams. Some people do hear her. Sometimes she's not only seen, sometimes she is heard. I got this story from my brother, Ray, and from someone else. The two did not know each other, and I heard the story years apart from each other, but it was the same story. My brother, Ray, died 100 years ago when he was a kid. He worked at the Willowbrook as a busboy at the old Willowbrook Ballroom. And he says when he would close up like around midnight or 12:30 at night, that's when we would have to head down there and pick him up. And that's when I would always look for Resurrection Mary. When I was a kid going with my mother in the car to go pick my brother up after his shift on weekends, but I never saw her. He said sometimes the busboys would be like 3 or 4 of them. They'd be downstairs like by the time clock in the basement, and just they would be clocking out, and they would hear this loud, weird scream, like coming from the kitchen area. And they would have no explanation for it because there was nobody down there but the 3 of them or the 4 of them. So he says they wouldn't even think to investigate it or to go look what caused it. They would just punch out real quickly, head upstairs, and then leave and go out the door, and that would be it. And then years later, now I'm talking like maybe 2 years ago, at Irish Legends, Ron Smolin, a gentleman that related the story to me, Ron Smolin used to actually have one of the dance orchestras that used to play at the Willowbrook Ballroom, and I believe his orchestra, he's still active. He plays around in Indiana and does different things.
Yeah, I met the man.
Of course,
I met him.
now with this going on, nobody's doing anything. But anyway, Ron Smolin related that story to me too. He said they would hear a scream, and this loud scream seemed to come from the kitchen area, and they had no explanation for it. They would go and look, and they would look, and there would be no one in the kitchen area. And when he told me this story, he says, oh my gosh, my brother told me the same story from 50 years ago when he was a kid working there. And that's 2 people that I heard that story from, and they always related that scream to Resurrection Mary. Okay.
Interesting. One of the other things is, now I want to get into the depth of why this is possibly happening, of why is there an apparition that happens on Archer Avenue? Now, me and Steve, we've gone back and forth on this, and this is part of the paranormal group that we have. What I believe is the Potawatomi tribe was big back in the day, way before the settlers came in to the area of the Willow Springs area, or Justice, or whatever. And they believed that Archer Avenue had a thing called ley lines. Ley lines are underneath the earth that cause mysticism, magical things to happen, supernatural things to happen.
So we put a cemetery right by the ley line.
Right. So it's a very interesting thing. So one of the things is that every now and then when we're walking down Archer Avenue, and we'll walk down it with our EMF detectors. Now I understand that the EMF detector that we're using is a generic thing. And there are sometimes electrical lines that we're going under. So we try to dismiss certain places. Now, every now and then, certain areas, we notate them. We'll get a high EMF reading, but the next following day, I will not get a high EMF reading. My theory is that the ley lines that lay underneath the earth there is what's happening is it's like a faucet. One moment that faucet is kind of on, it's just dripping a little bit, causing a little bit of supernatural energy to happen. Then there's another one there where if it goes a little bit higher and then it opens up all the way. When it's opened up all the way, I believe that's when the apparition seems to be on Archer Avenue, in certain parts of Archer Avenue. I believe the reason why you see this phantom hitchhiker a la Resurrection Mary is because of the ley lines that lay underneath on Archer Avenue. And when they're at full stream, they open up and this apparition will happen. Me and Steve talked about this many times. This is also just a theory. We cannot present it as fact, but it's a theory of Graveside Paranormal. What do you think of something like that, Bob?
It's a possibility. Now, the EMF detector, that's an electronic device?
Yeah, electronic meter
and
field.
It picks up on different energies that are supposedly in the area?
Yes, correct.
Okay, is it possible that if sometimes the reading is higher and lower because just the energy there is higher and lower? We do have a lot of phone cables there.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying.
A lot of traffic.
Yes,
so you could be, sometimes that may alter things too. Logically, that way, I
agree with you. But here's what's odd. These things are on 24/7. Now, one day I'll have it where I go out there and I get red in our EMF detector. The next day I go back and I don't get anything at all. Why is that if these things are still going 24/7?
Well, it's possibly too, why do you just not see a spirit every single day? Why
I agree.
One day and not another day?
These are just theories. These are theories that we think of. We believe that the land itself is supernatural land, and that's what develops the apparition to appear.
Yeah, people have talked about that for years, about the Archer Road theory, about Archer Road being haunted because so much strange stuff happens all up and down it, and you have so many haunts right there and all that. It's something we don't know. Possibly we will never know. We don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
So let's move on to, that was once again one of our theories that we talk about. Let's talk about the many times in 1973, Resurrection Mary was seen in a place called Harlow's on Cicero Avenue. They believe that that's Mary Bercovy. What I would like to talk about also is the time that the fence line, where she had the impressions in the fence.
Now that's another creation of Richard Crowe. There is some basis to that story, too. Do you want me to talk about the fence?
Yeah, please, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, about the gates, yeah. What happened with that story starts in the spring of 1977, I believe, where the bars were bent. And on closer examination of the bars, they did see fingers imprinted in them. And they believe this to be caused by Resurrection Mary, darting through the gates, darting away from Archer Road, darting through the gates of the cemetery, and somehow or another, her energy, she just went so forcefully, and her energy just bent the bars and left these impressions in it.
Sure.
And of course, when you talk to the cemetery about that, the cemetery denies it vehemently. They say, no, that was done by a truck. A truck hit that and done that and everything. But if you look at where that bar is supposed to be, there's no way that a truck could have done that. I don't know how they came up with that idea, but that was their way of explaining it.
That has
nothing. The story started floating around. The story floated around all over the place, and this became like a big tourist draw in 1970. Like you said, in spring of 77, this really started. And of course, Resurrection Cemetery had nothing to do with the supernatural. Catholic cemeteries really don't recognize any kind of a life after death in that way. They do, of course, recognize the spiritual life, given through Christ and given through God, and our eternal life in heaven. That way they do recognize, of course, but any sort of a spiritual life on earth like that, they don't recognize. So, of course, nothing to do with Resurrection Mary, which is why it's hard to do research with the Catholic cemeteries about ghosts and spirits. And nothing against them, it's just that's their belief.
Right. They don't want to
So they denied it. Well, they took a lot of for a story that they denied to be not true. They a lot of time, a lot of expense was spent on that. Around October of 1977, they actually had the bars removed. And that was a wrong time to do it, because October of 1977, of course, October being the month of Halloween, that really became a big tourist draw. People went and said, see, this is where the bars were. The bars were removed, or this is where Resurrection Mary left her imprint in the bars. And the bars were cut out, actually, taken away, and they replaced them. And they didn't replace them until the following year, like in December of 1978, like a little over a year later, they finally replaced the bars. Those bars still do have a little bit of a bend in them.
Yeah, they do.
And a little bit of an imprint in them, and they're painted that green. They actually did try straightening them the first time, and that didn't work. They tried repainting them, they sandblasted them, and it kept reappearing, and then finally they had them cut out. Over the years, people have offered to buy those original bars from the cemetery, wherever they are, if they indeed still do have them.
Well, one of them is missing right now. I have not seen a replacement yet. Like what you're saying, there's no way a truck did something like that. I mean, you look at it, it's dainty little fingerprints.
If they were going to come up with an excuse for it, they could have come up with something a little better, yeah.
So one of the other things is I'd like to leave it like this about Resurrection Mary. My theory is I think there's possibly three of them. Anna Maria Norquist, and I brought up all three through characteristics. First one, Anna Maria Norquist. Could it be a true story that this young lady is still looking to be buried correctly because she was mislaid due to the gravedigger streak, that she's outside walking the fence line of Resurrection Cemetery? That's a first characteristic. Could that be Anna Maria Norquist doing that? Could that be the one that's doing that, Anna Maria Norquist, walking the baseline? Second one, Mary Miskowski. If this did happen, a young lady did, could she be reenacting getting hit by a car? How many events have happened where they say that a girl darts out in front of a car? Could she be reenacting this? And then Mary Bacovey jumping on bumpers or the sides of the cars and wanting to go for that last dance, showing up at dance halls like I talked about, Harlow's or Liberty Grove or the O. Henry. Could it be three girls? And they each have these three different characteristics that are shown and heard and through stories about Resurrection Mary. All a little bit different, but all assuming that this is all Resurrection Mary. That is my theory. Everybody's theories and storylines are different, just like Bob's is different. But, we listen to each other and we try to, come up with the best theories that we possibly can. Bob, do you have anything added to say before we call it a night, my friend?
No, that's a new one. I never heard the story out of the people that I've spoken with. No one has ever told me a story of her jumping out and jumping onto bumpers and jumping onto the car, that type of thing like that. In actuality, no one has ever even given me the story. It's really odd. Like you've mentioned a few times, Hitchhiking Ghost and Hitchhiking Mary, and your first story, your first rendition of it was about a ghost hitchhiking, jilted by her boyfriend and hitchhiking home and killed by the car that way. In actuality, none of the stories of Resurrection Mary have any, the real stories of her, if these are indeed the real Resurrection Mary or Marys, have anything to do with hitchhiking. And I have to admit, all the people that I've spoken with, no one ever said that she was hitchhiking for a ride. Nothing like that at all. No.
No, I agree with you.
Jumping onto a car.
What I was saying was
across the road.
What I was saying was not in bumpers. The sides that are on the cars back in the 1930s. What
they're
called?
Like I said, you just hear different
the
stories.
The boards
out there. Yeah.
So I'm going to say thanks, Bob, for being on the show tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It was a
anytime.
pleasure. Yeah. Before I let you go, I want to ask you, how was Kylie O'Connell? Have you heard anything from Kylie?
I know yesterday was her birthday. We Graveside Paranormal put out a thing for her. I did call her recently. She'll probably call you. She's a young girl going out doing things.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you for coming out tonight. And as usual, you're
coming
always...
What are you coming out? I'm home. I ain't going nowhere. I'm in my kitchen.
You know what I mean.
Talking on the phone.
Well, thanks again, Bob, for throwing in your 2 cents on Resurrection Mary. We do appreciate you here at Graveside, the Spirits by the Graveside.
Oh, I just have one person I want to thank. Can I do that?
Yeah, knock yourself out, Bob.
Yes, I want to give a big shout out to Mr. Phil Dankowski. Phil Dankowski, I don't even know if he's still with, it was called PC Paranormal.
Okay.
And Phil is great. I've had Phil come on my show, just like you've been on my show a couple of times on the radio and that. And Phil was so wonderful. The other day, actually on Easter Sunday, I called Phil just to say, Phil, how you doing? Haven't heard from you. How you doing with all this going on and everything? And everything was fine with him. And he asked me, how are you doing? I said, I'm okay. I'm good. He says, do you have paper towels? Do you have sanitizer? Do you have that stuff at home? I said, well, yeah, I got some paper towels. I don't use a lot and that kind of thing. He said, I'm going to stop over by your house later on. Around 4 o'clock, I'll be by, and I want to bring you some stuff. He said, no, Bill, you don't have to do that. I'm okay. No, we'll stop by. It'll be later on about 4. He comes over on Easter Sunday about 4 o'clock in the afternoon with his son. They brought me a big bag. They brought me rolls of paper towels, a whole thing of sanitized wipes, a whole thing of antibacterial spray, antibacterial scrub, a whole thing of Tylenol, hand sanitizer,
that was very nice
little hand sanitizer you could take with you, ham from their Easter dinner, and potatoes from their Easter dinner, all this. I says, my Lord in heaven. And then later when he called me and talked to me, he said, how did you like everything? I said, Phil, you had me in tears. I said, that was so wonderful. That was just such a nice thing. And I said, what a nice example he set too, because he and his son came. I forget his son's name. I should know his son's name. He came with his son. I thought it was just so nice of him to do that. I just thought that was wonderful. So there have been a lot of nice people out there doing things like this.
Good. Well, that's good. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? I know that you're working on a book, just so everybody knows.
Oh, yeah, working on a book. Actually, I was set to do a tour tomorrow. I would have been doing a tour with Justin Maynard over at the Irish Legends. We were going to take folks on one of the paranormal busters around to some of the locations, but of course that's canceled. Everything is canceled now for that, so we don't know if we're going to reschedule those or if anything's going to be going this year. Don't know how that's going to go. Yeah, writing a book, going back and forth with that. Been working on that book for some time now. Now's the time to really get going with it. Also working on an idea for another book, but that book's going to have nothing to do with the paranormal. That's going to be something entirely different. That's another little hobby or interest of mine that I'm going to write about that. That's going to be all about early recordings and recording stars. Nothing at all to do with, well, maybe a little bit with paranormal on that, but not a whole lot.
Okay.
But yeah, working on some different projects and things and staying busy. Everyone, please stay safe. Please stay healthy. The best of luck and everything to everyone. Hopefully this mess will be all over soon and everyone will be well. I pray every day for folks that are not working and unemployed and having a tough time with that, and people that may be sick that are recovering or have recovered and that, and just wish everyone the best. This is a very, very difficult time for everybody, and I just want everyone to make it through all right and everything back to normal for everyone.
All right. Well, thanks, Bob. We do appreciate it. And I will get a hold of you later, my friend.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Mr. Neal. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Oh, also, too, don't forget to listen to Paranormal Radio.
Don't forget to
I haven't done a show. I haven't done a show now in a while because we haven't been doing it with all this going on. But, yeah, we're still up there on YouTube and that. They got the shows up on there. So you can listen to those. I might be doing one coming up down the line. I might go and do a solo show. Just go over to the studio there with John DeVita, and we'll stay 6 feet or 10 feet apart from each other, which we would anyway.
Yeah.
And I may go over there and do something.
Yeah,
so
you guys don't move.
Yeah.
You guys don't move too quick, so I don't think you guys will have to worry about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
right, Neil. Thank you so much, Neil. It's a pleasure.
All right, everybody, that was Mr. Robert Trzeciak, King of Paranormal Radio. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thanks, Neil. Talk to you later, sir.
All right,
bye-bye.